Both Tim Walz and Kamala Harris are embodiments for the left-wing ideology in a very interesting way I didn't consider until yesterday. I've talked a lot about how Kamala Harris is an embodiment for the left-wing ideology insofar as she is an incompetent woman who's been placed in the position that she's in directly because she's incompetent, and the left is at war with meritocratic systems and hierarchies and masculinity and what they deem the patriarchy. But then I realized that it doesn't just end with her. Walz is the quintessential Marxist identity for a white man who fits the criteria that the radical left-wing psychopathology wishes to portray of men, which is low testosterone, amenable, bumbling, non-threatening, subordinate, incompetent, basically embracing a position of worse than status voluntarily, despite the fact that it's untrue, because the left-wing ideology mandates it. In every clip you see of him, you see him clearly being subordinate to women. Anytime there's a woman on stage, he's immediately subordinate. He's basically like bowing to her. And so they want to put him forward as a model for how they see masculinity. And they see masculinity as something to be eradicated. And Candace Owens was talking about this recently with Andrew Tate, but masculinity is really the greatest single force against the left-wing agenda right now, because men are willing to stick up and say, no. As a matter of fact, decent definition of masculinity is willingness to enforce borders, parameters, and boundaries on the world, which includes saying, no, I don't agree with this. This man right here is not willing to enforce any of those things. Men say no, and they're willing to undergo immense conflict for the things that they believe. And that, along with the nuclear family and faith, is among the greatest threats to any ideological movement that doesn't trade on logic, merit, and rationality. Because in the 21st century, since the Enlightenment and in the civilized world, the way you convince men to do things is using the tenets of coherence, meaning logic, rationality, and reason. Really, you could trace that back to probably 2,000 years ago from the derivation of reason, where the parts of the world people wanted to live in were defined by those objective, coherent frameworks. But now the left is saying, of course, that the direction the future should be headed in, as well as even the way our psyche should be organized, is in alignment with the identitarian left, which says your virtue is determined by your victimhood status, and your victimhood status is determined by your intersectionalist identity, meaning your race, your sex, your sexual proclivity, your economic status. However you can find yourself to be oppressed is a way you can be a good person. But I realized Tim Walz is like every single quintessential dad from a sitcom that's basically been existing since the 1980s, whenever Family Ties was invented. Even the show Family Ties, I think that was the 80s. The dad was somewhat incompetent and, emotional. They've been doing this for a long time because a masculine man with boundaries is oppressive. That's referencing the patriarchy. That's referencing mechanisms like the coherent ones of logic, reason, rationality that stand in the way of the utopian left. Of course, it's not utopian. It is ultimately degenerate, pathological, and evil in the ways that I described, because victimhood is not something to worship. Identitarianism is the death of merit, because a person's status should be defined not based on their skin color, but on the content of their character and their place in a meritocratic system. But the left doesn't believe in those things, and so they call masculinity oppression. But I realized Tim Walz was selected for this. He was selected because he is that incompetent, bumbling, subordinate character of the non-threatening man who's just going along with it because, he's behind the curve. Oh, he's just following what the women say because, he's so uncultured. They literally release videos of him saying he eats plain food because spices and flavor is too adventurous for him. It's too outside the box. Whoever has the power to select the nominees for president for the left is doing so in direct accordance with the leftist resentment of Marxism, because we have the incompetent woman who is selected and worshipped because she is a woman. Competence is never a question. She's never asked a question of policy or challenged on any of her views, because that would be discrimination. Talk and thoughts of competence are oppression. And the only thing they're concerned with is the feverish, animalistic fear of somebody who embodies what their ideology detests to be in power, meaning a competent, masculine alpha billionaire who is literally an embodiment of every single thing that they detest. Meritocratic systems, capitalism, masculinity. I think on day one of the DNC, they said Trump's name 148 times and said Biden's name twice. All they do there is talk about Trump because their movement is one that is anti-reality, anti-masculinity, anti-meritocratic, anti-competent, anti-reality, anti-reason, anti-rationality, anti-logic, anti-seriousness, And every single person is required to buy into this lie, to say by default in support of Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, we don't value those things. Those things are unimportant. And really, when you study Marxism, their philosophy, they don't even believe in the existence of all the things that I mentioned. Because since they're outside the ideology of Marxism, they are oppression. Anything that leads you away from the counterfeit univariable analysis of the world that Marxism puts forward is labeled oppression. And so, of course, it makes sense that when they're running against an alpha masculine billionaire who's objectively a winner in competition with other men, has golden skyscrapers, is respected by billions of people, has proven himself in competition in business, that the person they would choose to run against him would be an incompetent woman who is worshipped as a boss queen because she's a woman and because of her skin color, and a bumbling, incompetent white man who plays the identitarian part for counterfeit virtue perfectly in accordance with their perverse ideology. It's actually very, very interesting. If you guys haven't checked out my videos exposing Kamala Harris as a communist verbatim, where she endorses communism 6 different times, saying we need equality of outcome and people need to end up in the same place and that we need to seize people's patents, etc. All of that is on camera in 4K. Or if you haven't seen my videos analyzing Kamala's drunken, incompetent state, be sure to check it out. But it was just last night when I recognized that they selected these people in exact accordance with the identitarian left. The incompetent white man who is subordinate to a black woman because she's a black woman, again, just directly because of her identity, and an incompetent woman because really what they fear more than anything is the competence of a masculine man holding them to order, because there's no way to bridge that. That's the reason they demonize people like Andrew Tate. There's no way to overcome absolute masculine competence and authority. There's no answer to it. They have no answer to it because they're coming from a place of emotional incompetence. You can't control it. You can't argue with it because reality has selected for it already. The reason masculine qualities define every single enterprise where value is created is because the masculine spirit is actually a synthesization of reality's realizable qualities. And as such, the left can't contest it. They can't deal with it. They can't argue with it. They can't overcome it. All they have, of course, just like all the devil has, is to pervert it, to deny it, to say the opposite of the truth. And so it is within this architecture that they put forward these candidates. If you appreciate my analysis, be sure to subscribe to the channel. This is actually one of my more important videos, but go check out my other base videos as well and subscribe to the channel.